I've had my SIM card actually in the Fold from the day that I got it. Now I am going to be working on a full in-depth review that's going to be coming up here on the channel, but I did want to share some of my thoughts and some experiences. So I want to start off with the good. So let's talk about the good initially, and then I'll talk about some of my concerns and improvements that I'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
So firstly, the big thing for me coming from the Fold 2 is that now we have that 120 hertz display, right, at the front. So what I used to find when the Fold 2 was, okay, you got 120 hertz and then you switch to 60 hertz, right? And you notice that because generally, if you're on, say, an iPhone and you're just on 60 hertz, then you're not missing 120 hertz, right? But on the Fold 2, it's just like you've got it on the same device, so it's a lot more noticeable, in my opinion, right? So I'm glad that the 120 hertz is there. That definitely is something that I noticed. The IPX8, right? Just the other day, I washed my hands, right? And normally, before getting the Fold, I'm like making sure I dry them out properly. And this time, I didn't really have to do that again. So that convenience there was nice, right? It was just it was just good having that there. Now, generally the experience, however, for me, right? Yes, we've got some of the new software features, and I like the fact that the apps are a bit more optimized for sure. I can actually use Instagram stories without having to worry about it. But generally, the experience is quite similar for me to the Fold. So that's kind of my sort of initial thoughts that I want to say before I pass it on to you, and then I'll talk about some of my other thoughts. Go for it.
For me, 120 hertz is great, especially gaming. Just having that fluid back and forth, especially when you're switching displays. Because sometimes I won't open it up to game with a larger display. I still use the smaller one, so that is great. The S Pen support is nice, especially with a bigger canvas. If you use the S Pen, if you're a Note user, that's something that really comes to mind. I do wish the S Pen support was on the front display also as well. Just because I get it that, and we kind of talked about this where we said, well, it's a small display, but if you use the S Pen, one of the things about the S Pen is you just pulling the S Pen out and start writing. Now, if you're writing for a long period of time, or you want to, put something more detailed, opening the Fold makes sense.
Yep.
But if you've got like quick tasks, you want to go, okay, I'm done with this, I'm done with this, I'm done with this. So like, okay, here we go. Opening the Note, the Fold doesn't take place. So that's where for me it's some of those things.
So that's interesting you mentioned the S Pen, because I didn't say that, because right now I do not have the S Pen. I'm still waiting on the case, which is why I've not done my full review, because I want to spend a few days with the S Pen. But here's one of the things that I did notice in my initial testing at the hands-on event, right? I like having the S Pen on the Fold. But here's the thing on the Fold. There's still that crease. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but depending on what you're doing, now if you're just signing something on one side, then it's fine. But then if you're trying to draw across the display, then for me, the crease is something that, you can feel when your pen is going across that crease. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is something obviously, again, that you wouldn't have an issue with on the cover display, because, it's flat, it's steady. But when you're opening, it's like, yes, I've got this big canvas. All right, let me try to draw something. Okay, this crease is there, and I notice it a lot more, because generally I forget about the crease when I'm touching the phone, just generally through the screen. I don't notice it. S Pen, I do.
Yeah, I do notice it. I mean, but for me, I have no artistic drawing skill in my body whatsoever. So
Sure.
For me, it's more.
I mean, looking at your beard, it looks like you have some artistic skill.
Forget you. I was going to use another word, but forget you.
Sorry. It's looking good. The beard is looking good.
Yes. I had a fresh haircut, so Saf is he's being a little childish, here. That's all I have to say.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. We were talking about artistic skills, and then there is your fresh.
He was waiting for his segue. He was waiting for this the whole time.
Got it. Boom.
but I mean, for me, writing through it, I've used it to write across. It's fine when you're writing. I can see if you're looking for those finer details. If you're drawing, that's going to be a concern. But I think it's something that people will get used to, and also I think it will get better over time. What's interesting with the crease, though, is that I know you don't have the flip yet, or at least you haven't done anything with it, but the the crease on the flip is less noticeable than the crease on the fold.
Interesting.
Especially even just running your hands through it. I don't know, maybe it's because of the size, because of course the width is smaller than what you have with the fold, which is just, like a huge piece of paper that you're folding, too. So that might be something to play with. But I think some of the things I'm seeing, which I'm going to address in the video I'm doing, which I'm comparing the Note 20 or the Note series versus the Fold, is a lot of people are stacking specs and being hesitant about it, because I've seen a lot of comments go like, the on the display camera is 4 megapixels, it used to be 10. How about we get all these? Why don't we get all these massive pro features? And I definitely understand that, but I also, I think we talked about this. Like, if Samsung does that, it's going to be $2,000. It would not be. Actually, it might even be more if they decide to stack the same cameras as well.
So here's the thing with the 4 megapixel camera, right? We had a video call earlier on, right, to test it. What did you think? Generally, was that something that was like super like, oh, it's not good? Like, it wasn't nothing major, was it? It was okay? Acceptable?
No, it was acceptable. It was acceptable, but I'll give you two answers. For me, it's acceptable because I know there's an option with the 10 megapixel in the front, and I don't care. I am one of those people who is like, there's another option. Like, don't stop pretending like you can't use both, right?
Yeah.
But there are people who will tell you that, well, if you're again, like, if you use the internal display, you do a lot of stuff with it, then it's still acceptable, I think. But I think it's still a grade below.
Yeah.
What you would expect.
But here's my thing, okay? I don't mind that, okay? The thing for me is, I still notice it. Okay, now sure, if you've got something like, fully immersive, but I can still see it because it's never fully invisible, right? Now I actually have the ZTE Axon 30 with me here. Now this has got the second generation and display. You cannot see it whatsoever. Like, if you're looking at it flat, right? Obviously, if you put it in certain lighting, but if you're looking at it flat, you don't notice it whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. Granted, this is glass and this is a second generation, but that's one thing that I do. I mean,
so yes. The question is, which quality is better?
That's something that I have to do some more testing with, right? Because I'm still like kind of. But the thing is, in terms of it being noticeable, because okay, for me, I still notice it. So I'm kind of like, maybe in my opinion, it's just like this whole under display thing. It's 50% because I can still see those dots, and everybody can still see those dots, whatever you've got in the display. So yeah, it's kind of gone, but it's still half there. In my opinion, you should have just left it as a punch out, right? Because unless you could make it disappear like you can do here on the ZTE, right? If you can make it disappear completely, pretty much completely, 90%, then fair enough. But right now, I still see this dot matrix, thing going on. I always still notice that it's there, right? So that's my opinion about that 4 megapixel camera. Personally speaking, I would have minded that punch out. It's fine. I know others would differ.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. There was like, I had stopped seeing it until you just mentioned it again. The reason is, I'm serious.
Yeah.
But when you're gaming and when there's action going through, like when there's video or content going through, I don't see it.
You kind of forget about it.
Yeah, it's gone completely. With a stationary image, yeah, it's more visible. But whenever there's, moving playing content. Like moving content, or even Call of Duty Mobile, where there's graphics, there's things on there, I'm like, ooh, my whole display is there. So I really enjoyed gaming on this because I was like, it feels like I'm gaming on a tablet, but not as big as an iPad.
Yeah.
So again,
it's kind of like that in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. So I mean that's a fair point there as well. So yeah, apart from that, generally I've really enjoyed using it. Battery life has been good overall. The cameras seem to be pretty good too. The thing for me, right, with the Fold 3 is when I came from the Fold 1 to the Fold 2, that was a big jump for me. I was like, okay, this is a noticeable upgrade. It's a noticeable difference, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Going from the Fold 2 to the Fold 3, it still feels the same. You know what I mean? Like, okay, yes, there's these increments, right? But the experience is still pretty much the same. The cover display, yes, it's 120 hertz. It's still very difficult to type on, right? I pretty much sound like you when I'm typing on the cover display to people. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like my spellings are all over the place because the autocorrect is just not happening because the keyboard's way too small. So here's what I would have liked. I would have liked this to be slightly wider. You know what I mean? Like, have you tried the Mate X2?
No.
Okay, the Mate X2 is slightly wider, and I like that because it almost makes the cover display a lot more usable.
I have something for you here.
Okay.
And I wish Samsung went this way. And I think this is just I'm pulling this out of the hat somewhere. I think because of certain things with COVID, they went with this because if you notice, here's the thing. And COVID and sales. So this has been selling well. It sold about, let me start from here. It sold about 800,000 to 1 million units last year. But they probably had maybe about 2 million units, which means hardware mold is similar. You can use the same hardware. You just have to fine tune, fix things, of course, where we got the better IPX rating. That allows them to keep the cost down. That's the first thing, right? Now, I saw your video with the Huawei, right? And I think Samsung is going to either incorporate some of that design, because again, that was also more flush with the Fold as well, and a wider feel that will give them that redesign for next year as well. But I think because they had run into some issues with producing the amount of chips needed for the Notes earlier this year, they canceled the Note because they didn't need that many units for the Fold in terms of chips. And also they don't need that many units. They need a lot of units for the FE. The FE still doesn't sell as much as the Note, but you combine those two together, that covers your Note supply. This was to me, now that you just mentioned it, it feels like everything was a strategic management issue that they had to literally go,
but from a consumer point of view, like this is the thing. Like,
I'm not disagreeing.
I was super excited about the Fold 2 because and I think kind of Samsung kind of went straight from you had the Fold 2 with a massive cutout, you had the super small cover display, and then it's like a massive jump, right? And then now it's just like very incremental on the Fold 3. Now, yes, some of these features that we talked about, especially the IP rating, the S Pen experience, that's all well and good. But overall, the user experience for me, like I'm still having the same issues that I had with the Fold 2, right? Especially with the cover display being like the cover display just being too small, right? Because I mean, yes, I can scroll through, but as soon as I need to do anything practical on it, I have to keep opening it up. So if I want to type something quickly, right, I can't do that on that tiny keyboard. If this was, a centimeter wider, that would have made things a lot better in my opinion. But nevertheless, I still think it's a really, really good smartphone. And, when it comes to foldables, it's right up there and I really enjoy it. And especially considering the fact that it has now dropped slightly in price too. I hope you enjoyed that clip. If you want to hear the full podcast episode, then that will be linked down below. And if you want to see more clips like this, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss them. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf Speaks, and I'll see you next time.